Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another exciting episode of the Alibi-ish podcast. I'm your host, John Crimes, with my wonderful co-host,
Desi Madigan.
All right, and today we do have a special guest, one of the first guests that we're going to have on the podcast, and it was very interesting teaching. Well, not I won't say teaching, but like the different kind of format that we use for our guests, because we do our cases to try to tell out the story using all of the facts involved in the case. So Amanda Shirley is here, and she is going to join us on this case about her brother. So welcome for the first time, Amanda, coming to our platform.
Thank you for having me on.
Anytime, I'm glad that you were able to catch us this early on. I know that we on different time schedules, and we got the seasons changing. We got pranksters around. It's
You mean like April Fools that got coming up?
Yeah,
I don't think Amanda does a lot of pranking, but I'm not big with the pranking, and I think ever since I was a child, just the idea of having people come lie to me or make a joke and then suddenly they tell me it's just an April Fool's joke. It's just not.
If I don't know, like when celebrities do it, if it's really well thought out, then. But
yeah, that's true. Real elaborate.
Yeah. But
Well,
Amanda,
DJ was very well known for pranks. It was every day was April Fool's to DJ. So
wow, that's wonderful, wonderful, wonderful. I know, of course, with this being your brother, this meant the absolute world to you. But well, you caught my attention because you're actually fighting for not only your brother, but you're fighting for a much bigger cause that a lot of people aren't noticing. That's sort of become the climate of the true crime community. You wanted to touch on those things?
main thing is I have noticed since I have been fighting for my brother that male victims do not get the exposure and the attention that female victims do. And I want to do something about that. I want to change that. So that is the main thing. Yeah. It's awful. I mean, people are literally begging people to cover these cases or to share something, and they just get ignored. And me being a female, advocating for men should tell people something, because us women are usually all about us, women. And I'm telling you, no, male victims can be victims. They are victims. I've had people tell me, well, it doesn't happen to men as much as it does to women. It does. You just don't hear about it because it's not being covered.
Mm-hmm. You're absolutely, there's a lot to that you just mentioned, because much like domestic violence situations, the first thing that comes to your mind is the woman victimized. Mm-hmm. And of course, men also are victims of domestic violence, of homicides, of senseless crimes. But I think, unfortunately, what is not mentioned is that it's not attractive to advertise as, I don't know, a girl, a pretty girl, a mother. The sympathy is much stronger there for a woman than it is for just a random guy, because that's how they see it.
And I also believe that people have, men are stereotyped into being this manly, strong protector figure that, can defend himself and take care of himself. That's not the case. Men can be victims too. I mean, I know, believe me, I'm here. I'm in that position. I see it.
I like, I talked to Sarah Turney. I talked to Carly Bodine. You guys have this extremely strong fighting spirit where no one is going to tell you no, and you're going to push forward to go after what you cherish the most, and which is justice. Is that a coincidence?
I think it all just boils down to the person. I know my whole life I have been a very stubborn, hard-headed girl. Even as a kid, I had to have the last word or die, in an argument. My mom always told me that I actually think my mom jinxed me. She had a sister that was just like me. So my aunt was stubborn and hard-headed and a smart ass. And my mom, too, I always told her if I ever have a kid like her, I'll beat her. And, of course, I turned out just like her. So
always happens.
I think my dad raised us to always fight for what you believe in, never give up for what you believe in. And, if you want it, you got to work for it. So
I think
that's what I'm doing.
John hit on something about, females and where this sudden rush of power comes in. And it's just that thing where if you see your own child being, I don't know, about to be hit by a car or something, you forget that you are supposed to be sensitive and female, and you become superwoman. And I think
exactly
when someone victimizes your family, your spouse, your son, your daughter, your brother, anybody, you become that superwoman without even thinking. And just like Sarah that John mentioned, I've seen her fighting like heck. I mean, she's just relentless. And I think that's what also drew my attention to you, is watching how relentless you've been, because it's exhausting. I can tell that it's exhausting.
It is. It's physically and mentally exhausting.
Yeah, and I know we filmed like a couple of episodes already. We haven't determined in which order that they're going to come out at this time. But I remember after we did a couple, we specifically said, let's do guys, let's make sure we get guys involved. And then that's when I went looking for you, because I know that that's something that you have fought strongly for. And yeah, I got to excuse the little dogs, but that's something we fought strongly for. And I'm glad that we were able to join the fight, as you have many others out here that's spreading your brother's story. Stories and situations like these, they don't end well, so it's not going to be all roses at the end of the podcast. So before we get into it, you want to say something fun or that you loved about your brother?
Just his personality. There was never a dull moment around. When he was around, he always had people laughing. He had this little British accent that he would do. It was actually, he called it a British accent, but it was almost like it was a mix between British and Australian. And he would start using that accent, just aggravating us and, being silly. And he would literally get stuck on it and would end up, talking in that accent all day. He had his own little dance move. One was called the sprinkler, one was called the weed eater, and one was called the chainsaw. And it was all like motions of, using these tools and stuff. And he was just hilarious. He was so funny. Wow. He should have been a comedian. That's what he should have done. He should have been a comedian.
I'm glad that you have that to pull from, because what you have to do, repeating your story, your brother's story over and over as often as you have it, I'm sure it brings you down sometimes, but I'm glad that you have those happy memories to pull from, because I think that's where you draw your strength from too.
Oh, yeah, my brother's right next to me. He's been right beside me this whole way. And on the days that I get discouraged and I just feel like I can't go on, he's there to kick me in the ass and, make me keep going. I just feel really strongly that DJ is pushing me to get his truth out there, and he's not going to be at peace until it is.
Okay. Well, without further ado, we're going to go and get right into his story. And again, thank you for joining our podcast and allowing us to share DJ's story.
Thank you for covering.
Thank you, Amanda.
Thank you.
So October the 3rd of 2016, my daughter was 5 years old, and I was homeschooling her at the time. I had just sat down for the day to start doing some of her schoolwork with her, and I get a phone call from my mom, and I answered it, and she was hysterical. I couldn't understand a word she was saying. She was crying, she was screaming. She didn't even realize I was on the phone, and she ended up hanging up on me. And so I called her back immediately because I knew something was wrong. She answered the phone, still hysterical, crying, screaming. I couldn't understand her, and I finally told her, I was like, Mom, I can't understand you. What's wrong? And she just blurted out, DJ's dead. And at the time, my husband was working third shift, so I jumped up off the couch, screaming, just saying to myself out loud, no, 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 no. on my way to the bedroom to wake him up. I get to the bedroom, turn on the light, I scream at him, DJ's dead. He wakes up, what do you mean DJ's dead? About that time, I just fell to the floor. I was shaking uncontrollably. I guess I was in shock. It was so awful and so bad, I didn't even realize my mom was still on the phone. It will forever be the worst day of my life. And I'll never get over it. I'll never learn to deal with it. And I honestly don't think I'll ever learn to cope with it. How do you do that? How do you live knowing that your brother was murdered and that he left so much behind and has so many more things to do in life?
He ain't gonna do shit. He ain't gonna do shit, DJ. This is just your mind playing with you. Oh no, man. We all the way up here in Flintstone, Georgia, right by Tennessee, 20 minutes away from Chattanooga. But I don't know anyone in Chattanooga. My mom and Amanda them over our way in Alabama, so if he does decide to do something like he did with that bat just last week, or that knife, I won't have any way to defend myself, so... Alright? Best thing I can do is get away from the roommate's old trailer back here and head up to the old man's main cabin. He's been good to let me stay here, on and off. Good. Brandy's coming with me, so at least she's showing she's on my side. At least this time. Why is he following us, though? God damn. Alright, DJ, this is what you're gonna do. You're gonna take your wife and we're gonna go up to the main house and we're gonna sit here and I'm gonna contact Mama. We're gonna play it cool until Mama can get here and pick me up. Where's my damn phone? 11:37 a.m. DJ texts his mother, "You got to come get me now." 11:42 a.m. DJ mother replies, "What is it, DJ? I'm sick." 11:43 a.m. DJ texts his mother, "I'm going to end up dead here." 11:43 a.m. His mother says, "What is going on?" DJ replies, "Same shit." 11:44 a.m. His mother says, "I'm too sick to drive." Sometimes I look at Brandy and I wonder if she's worth it. I mean, when she was in jail, I was just clean a couple months ago. Clean. Living a good life. All went back downhill. And for her indiscretion, some crazy man is walking behind us with a look on his face like he wants to do something to me. He sit down in his love seat. I think somebody in the back there, so I don't think he gonna do nothing with people around, but let me contact Mama. 11:45 a.m. She asks, "Is it because of Brandy?" 11:46 a.m. DJ replies, "Yeah." 11:45 a.m. She asks, "Is it because of Brandy?" 11:47 a.m. DJ says, "I done told you I can't stay here. I can't take the stress." 11:48 a.m. DJ mother tells him, "They always are. They going ahead and doing my surgery next week." Is Brandy worth it? I love that girl. I love that girl with all of my heart through her indiscretions and everything. I know people feel like we shouldn't be together, but if I beat rehab before, this time I do it with her. And this time, maybe we can get out chilling from Mama. Everything will work out perfect. All I got to do is get away from this guy. I already told people how crazy he is. Aunt Frances right down the road knows too. God damn it, Mama. 11:51 a.m. DJ texts his mother, "Bullshit, Mom. We both got to get out of here to save our lives." DJ mother replies, "I'm trying to save mine. I can't take the stress anymore." 11:53 a.m. DJ texts his mother. Mom, please don't make me beg you. 11:54 a.m. DJ mother texts, I can't, DJ. I'm sorry. I love you. I don't think Mama realized the urgency in this situation that's going on right now, but I've already told people if anything happens to me, the first thing they need to do is check my roommate and make sure they check Brandy as well, too. You so paranoid, DJ. You know everything's gonna be okay.
If you're ever lucky enough to not have to call 911, that's a real blessing. But if or when you do, in my humble opinion, you don't necessarily hope that the operator matches your level of urgency, as they are trained to keep calm and assess the situation as best they can to get you the help that you need. But what you do hope is that the operator sounds like they're attempting to rush and get you the help that you need as they're gathering the important and pertinent information. On October 3rd, 2016, at 1:12 p.m., a call came into the Walker County 911. The caller, who here I'll refer to as the roommate, as he was one of the people that was living in the home at the time.
Walker County 911.
Yes, sir. I need a ambulance at,
Okay, what's the problem?
we got a guy shot himself.
Okay, what did he shoot himself with?
Shotgun.
Okay, is he breathing?
It looks like it. I don't know. I just think
How old is he?
So I tried to get the gun. And it went off. And he had it in his mouth. And I was like, man, you know.
What is it, a 12 gauge?
Yeah.
Is he still able to talk? Is he still able to talk?
No. I mean, he stuck it in his mouth.
The seconds that go by with no one talking, no one gathering information. Hang on 1 second. Oh, hold on. Wait. These are incredibly valuable seconds, and the amount of times that he's asked how old he is incredibly frustrating. I understand you need to know if you're dealing with a child or with an elderly person. It was a little frustrating to hear how much time it's taking to let the caller know that help is on the way. The man, DJ Fickey, is bleeding out. He's in distress, and in no way is he capable of speaking. Meanwhile, we hear Brandy in the background, the victim's wife and mother of his 3 children, attempting to say something as she is reacting to what's in front of her, a horrific scene playing out. But every time she tries to say something, the caller is quick to raise his voice, so perhaps only his voice is heard to the operator. That's how it comes across on the call. Brandy attempts to say many things at many different times.
All right, is he still breathing?
Yeah, it looks like it.
Hang on 1 second. I'm getting everybody going. How old is he? How old is he? Is he? How old is he? Walk Central, Puckett 803, Station 2, respond.
Already, with the little information that the caller has given us, it's hard to have it sound like a suicide. He mentions he went to grab the gun as DJ had it near or in his mouth, and it sort of went off. Well, already that's not sounding like a suicide if your hands are near or on the trigger and then it goes off. But I'm not a private investigator nor a detective, just a listener of the 911 call. Then it hangs up. The call ends. One thing about 911 calls, especially ones like that, if it ends abruptly, they will call back, and this time it was a different operator that called back in this case. And as the call picks up, you can hear the muffled voice of Brandy once again in the background.
How old is he? How old is he? How old is he?
I'm 27.
27?
Yeah.
Okay, is he still breathing? Where's the damage done to his head?
It's right in his mouth. It's right in his mouth.
It's inside his mouth?
Right here with me.
Okay. Is there an exit wound? Is there an exit wound?
Listen, come down. Hey, son.
Is there an exit wound?
Yeah. What's his mouth? Hey, what's in his mouth?
Is he breathing?
It's breathing.
He is responding. 27-year-old male advised that he had a gun in his mouth. There was a discharge. There is an exit wound. Possibly still breathing. We're still attempting to gain further. Is he breathing? What's your name?
My name's Come on, Spanish. You're a loser. Come on. I got my hands full.
Is he inside the house? Is he inside the house?
No, man.
The new operator is a female, and what she's about to advise the caller to do while gathering information, in my opinion, is one of the most bizarre and perhaps irresponsible instructions I've heard with as many 911 calls as I've listened to. She first begins to question who touched the gun, and then she asks him to do this.
Lyndon still trying to confirm if he's breathing or not. Let's try to do a second. Wait now.
Hello. Oh my God.
Can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am.
This is Walker County 911, okay?
It's 911. Yeah.
Okay. Listen to me, okay?
I will as soon as I get off here. Smart.
Okay.
Stay.
I need to talk to you. Can you give me your attention?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. The gun, where is it located now?
It's in the chair with him.
Okay.
I got the gun up and checked to see what it was. It was a 12 gauge.
Okay. So you moved the gun, is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. Can you secure that gun? Can you get it unloaded safely and lay it to the side out of the way?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Can you do that while I'm talking to you?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. I'll give you just a minute, okay?
I say, they told me to get the gun and secure it.
No, don't shoot it. Secure it.
Don't shoot it.
Unload it. Listen. Are you going to be the one doing it?
It ain't but a single shot. It looks like a shot off.
Okay, so there's nothing in the gun at this point, correct?
No.
The gun is empty, correct?
No. There's a gun, Brandon.
Again, my police training comes from watching one too many true crime stories and news broadcasts, but you never instruct someone else to touch a potential murder weapon, aka evidence, and contaminate it with fingerprints or DNA and the like. She asked him to unload the gun safely, move the gun, touch the gun. The man now has an explanation as to why his fingerprints are on the gun. Of course, in order to get the gun, the caller is asking others to hand him the gun. So, more people, more fingerprints, more DNA contamination. Keep in mind, we're still trying to get help for DJ, who foresaw this exact scenario just minutes prior when he was frantically texting his mother and in fear for his life, certainly not saying goodbye nor sounding like a suicide text. Brandy is again heard screaming in the background, over and over. The operator is still trying to get the caller's attention amongst all the chaos in the house. She calls out his name numerous times, over and over, trying to get him to calm down enough to listen to instructions or to give more information. Another hang-up. All of this chaos and explanation still does not line up with it being a suicide, according to the family of DJ. You see, when the roommate, who is the caller in this case, is taken in for questioning after DJ's body is taken from the home, he recounts the story from the night and changes it a little bit from time to time, which happens a lot in the story. He mentions that not only did DJ have the gun pointed at himself, the roommate was grabbing for the gun, ostensibly touching it and pressing the trigger. But he mentions that Brandy is now pulling on his arm while this is happening. This is denied by Brandy and by DJ's family, that she did not do anything of the kind. She did not pull his arm. She did not touch him. She did not touch the gun while this is happening. And as will be noted throughout this story, DJ's sister Amanda, his strongest supporter and fighter, does not think of this as a suicide. At best, as an accidental shooting, all the way up to a homicide, since the death was technically caused by the hands of another. And throughout the roommate's questioning, he never refers to it as a suicide, nor does he say that in the 911 call. So why was it ruled that?
Let's go back 5 months. To be specific, Cinco de Mayo of 2016, as everyone is enjoying their margaritas and having fun around America, not really knowing why they are celebrating, just knowing that, hey, it's a fun day. It wasn't so fun for the loving couple DJ and Brandy. You see, DJ and Brandy was not at some Mexican restaurant enjoying the festivities like everyone else. They were inside of a car being pulled over by the police, and they all will be charged with drugs since no one would take the blame. It's the old trick we always think that works, and it never does. The police pull you over and see drugs in the car, and if no one claims it, then the police can't arrest anyone. But yeah, the police arrest everyone. Sort of appears that this would end up being a great thing for DJ, as Brandy will remain in jail for most of the summer, and DJ got to do a lot of good things while Brandy was in jail. The most important thing he got was sober. DJ was living with his mom, which means that he was around his children, around his sister Amanda and his family and his loved ones. You see, DJ was the kind of person that he didn't do drugs all the time or in private. He did them when he was socializing around people that did drugs. So keeping him here in this location, away from Brandy, was awesome at this time. DJ even began doing mixed martial arts, something that he became quite good at. This was all on the up and up, remaining this way, and it will stay this way until the date of August the 19th of 2016. You see, while DJ was clean and sober, going to his outpatient for rehab, and he'd been doing this all summer. But on this day, Brandy got out of jail and came back home to DJ's mom to be with her husband and the children. On paper, this is actually a great thing too, I'd assume, since she can focus on her family, and it was good. I mean, just 2 days later, you couldn't have come out at a more perfect time. It was their anniversary. The children got to stay home with DJ's mother, and DJ took Brandy out on the town going to the movies. It reminds me, the last 5 months before his untimely death reads like a star-crossed lover's story. And whenever we get these stories, we know there's something good that happens and then something bad that happens. Romeo and Juliet getting married right before they're whisked away apart, knowing they'll never see each other again. Maybe DJ and Brandy heard of Romeo and Juliet's story because they wanted to stay together, even when the bad part came. A little over a week later, on August the 29th of 2016, someone came looking for Brandy at DJ's mom's house, and they came from DeKalb County in Georgia. It was either a bondsman or for a warrant. Whatever it was enough to spook the young couple. I'm thinking Brandy should leave. If she wants to run away, at least DJ can stay at the place where he was clean from drugs. But we know DJ is too nice for that, and DJ loves his wife Brandy. So the couple will pack up their things, leaving their children with DJ's mom as they head back to Brandy's aunt's house in Georgia. And this is where they'll stay for a couple of nights, we assume, because really from August the 29th all the way to September the 6th, no one had really heard from the young couple. So there's no telling if he stayed the entire time or if DJ went on his own. But we do know on September the 6th of 2016, Brandy stayed at a friend's house on 41st Street. Subjective when I say stayed, because Brandy became jealous of one of the girls there. And I can understand, or I can see it, I'd say, since Brandy was away and DJ got clean, looking good, and he has that outward personality that draws attention to the room with his silliness and his charm, to say the least. And to add insult to injury, this is another place of many places that they go to where people are always in and out, such as like the old man's house. People are always in and out. So with Brandy's jealousy, she'll go back to her aunt's, and DJ will be stranded for a couple of days before going back to the house on 41st Street. I personally think this is the spark that made DJ and Brandy go back to her aunt's house and come up with money to get a hotel room. Because today in 2021, we have other options if we don't have money. Other currencies, as you'd say, such as Dogecoin or Bitcoin. But back in 2016, DJ and Brandy found another currency they can use, their blood and plasma. The star-crossed lovers will come up with blood and plasma until they get just enough money to get the hotel that they want, except they didn't get enough to get a ride to this hotel. So Brandy would go back to her aunt's that night, and the next day, on September the 10th of 2016, DJ would go back to the old man's home. Unable to be away from his wife, on September the 11th, just one day later, he will convince the old man to drive down to pick Brandy up and bring her back to stay at the house to DJ. This urgency to be with his wife blinded him from the danger in the backyard. So let's keep up with these dates. On September the 11th of 2016, DJ and his wife are together. 3 days later, on September the 14th of 2016, DJ is going to call his sister Amanda and leave a voicemail letting his sister know that his wife got back with the roommate in the backyard, living in his camper. The man she had an affair with, she's now back with. Can you imagine this? Can you imagine living in a home, and if you were to look out of the window of this home, your wife is living in a camper having an affair with someone else right before your eyes. Now take this information and know this is a mere 3 weeks before DJ's life will come to an untimely end. He'd become so desperate that 4 days later he'd be sending messages out on Facebook to anyone, friends, family, someone to simply help him. DJ got away, but at the end of the day he ended back at the old man's house when he couldn't find anywhere to go. And things become so drastic, this is when DJ finds it best to tell other people about his plights. His friend Misty Croft and her daughter Savannah pick him up, and he tells them a horrific story. One so bad she's going to drive around in circles in a parking lot just to let DJ get it out and tell her. He'd tell her the roommate who is sleeping with his wife is trying to kill him. He'd tell them how this roommate would jump on him and beat him up while he's in the shower, putting a knife to his throat. He'd tell them how the roommate would jump on him with a ball bat, and how sometime he'd fight back, knocking the roommate's tooth out with a golf club. You know, when people tell you horrific stories, your brain instantly starts to look around for clues, and that's exactly what Misty did, and she became horrified as she saw DJ was covered in bruises. These bruises would be consistent of a bat or a golf club. It gets worse. He'd also tell them about how the roommate gave him a hot shot of drugs. You see, a hot shot is a strong mixture of drugs given to someone to make them have an overdose. DJ became sick for a couple of days. This is when he told him, if anything happens to him, to have the roommate and Brandy investigated because he would never hurt himself. And look at DJ's mental mind state, because after he told them, if anything happens, to not only investigate the roommate, but to investigate Brandy, he'd tell them to drop him back off at the old man's home to be with Brandy. 6 days later, on September the 30th of 2016, DJ would walk to his Aunt Frances Bentley's home, tell her the exact same story. The shower, the knife, the bat, the bruises, leaving out the hot shot, of course. This is his aunt, by the way. He'd tell her another story, too. You see, just in these little 6 days, a lot can happen. And what did end up happening is that Brandy and DJ ended up getting back together. Star-crossed lover things. Whenever something good happens, something bad happens directly after that. You see, Brandy would be on the side of the old man's property, swinging on a swing set as she talked to DJ about their future plans, paradise, safety. Where were they most secured? When they were living with DJ's mother, when they were living with their children, when they didn't have to worry about drugs or any negativity. Let's go back to paradise until she sees a shotgun pointed at her face from the roommate who tells Brandy, you will only leave here in a body bag. Oh, I can imagine Aunt Frances' face when DJ told her this information. And after telling her this, DJ asked, could she drop him off on Dawes Avenue? I would assume she felt happy that it was anywhere except for the old man's house back with Brandy. But later that night, DJ will go back to the old man's house with Brandy. On October the 1st of 2016, DJ's mother would receive a phone call describing him to be in good spirits, great spirits. Not only this, but DJ would finally get to talk to his son, Jack. Jack telling his father how he wanted this choo-choo train for Christmas. DJ made sure to tell his mother to not buy that train for his son on Christmas because he wanted to do it. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm telling you, a man that they are saying committed suicide on October the 3rd of 2016 had plans to buy his son a choo-choo train on December the 25th of 2016. My.
After that 911 call, it was a very crazy and erratic scene. Brandy was screaming words we could not make out. She was trying to get a message across, And as the caller who called 911 was constantly yelling over her, telling the dispatcher that a man had just shot himself in his home. October 3rd, 2016, 1:22 p.m. was the first time an officer arrived on the scene. And from this moment on, the series of events just become more and more puzzling and frustrating and irresponsible. When Officer Weber arrived, the occupant of the home had a red expanded 12-gauge shotgun shell in his hand, which the 911 operator had apparently told him to unload from the weapon. And he did just that. I mean, we went over the kind of crazy instruction that was and how it may have impacted this case earlier. Officer Weber then went inside and saw the horrific scene of DJ in a chair with a devastating and life-ending wound to his face. No pulse, no breathing, no signs of life. The house was then cleared and emergency services arrives. Deputy Chandler and Detective Ellenberg take over the scene, and they were told by the occupant of the home that he was there in that room because Brandy and DJ were arguing, and that DJ seemed depressed and had threatened suicide that day and also in the past, and had finally done it that day. But according to the family, none of this was true. DJ never spoke of depression, nor had he threatened suicide that day. And the text messages that he was sending his mother, if they were any indication, it was that of fear and wanting to leave where he was and needing a way out, a pickup, a drive, a ride. Now, the roommate's initial version of events was that he was in the other room when he heard the gun go off. He ran into the room and saw that DJ had shot himself. He will then change that story a couple more times. The coroner arrives to the scene and observes the gunshot was left to right and the barrel had been placed on the left cheek, just below the mouth, with no exit wound. And as Amanda, DJ's sister, and other experts who have examined the reports and the autopsy, they've emphasized that DJ was right-handed. It would have been a very odd and awkward position to hold a gun and shoot himself. DJ's body was taken to the GBI crime lab for an initial autopsy. All of this chaos happening without giving answers to the family of DJ. I mean, after the 911 call, they were scattered and trying to figure out what was happening with their loved one, with their brother, their son, and getting no answers. After his body was taken in for the initial autopsy and they investigated, there was no suicide note that was ever found, no indication that DJ had planned this out for that day. And DJ's mother, Kathy, told the coroner of all the texts that she was receiving from DJ and how he felt that he was being threatened. As the detectives and others were surveying the scene, they asked the roommate for a gunshot residue test of his hands, and he consented, but not before mentioning that he had shot a gun a few days prior and that he had touched the gun to wrestle it away from DJ. That's contradictory to what he had said earlier, that he wasn't in the room. Oddly enough, a gunshot residue test was never conducted on DJ.
Hi, Mr. Eccles. My
Yes.
name is Dr. Grandi. How are you?
Hey, how you doing, Dr. Brandy?
Doing well. I'm glad you remember me.
Oh, yes.
So I just wanted to let you know we got the toxicology report back on Mr. Fickey,
hmm
and it showed stimulants that were present and not any depressants in his in his blood. And based on that, I am going to stick with the cause and manner of death that are listed in the autopsy report. And if you need a copy of the toxicology report, you can request that via Open Records, which I believe you've been in touch with to get copies of the autopsy report and other items as well.
So to make sure I understand, the toxicology report came back and the drugs that were found doesn't
Yes.
indicate that it was a homicide. You're sticking with suicide?
It shows a stimulant that's present,
Uh-huh.
and based on that information, there's not anything that would appear to have rendered him unable to defend himself, and it appears that it is most consistent with a suicide still.
Huh. Even after all the other evidence.
Yes.
Huh. Okay. And even, I mean, was there a firearm residue test done on Mr. Fickey before he was cremated?
Let me.
Because I didn't see that in your report.
It is not routinely performed unless it is requested. Let me check through the evidence and see if I don't recall doing one. Let's see. Evidence for firearms. Let me see what that has. I believe that's just projectiles. Just 1 minute, please. My system goes a little slow, so I'm trying to open it. Evidence for firearms. Yes, those are just the projectiles. So, no, I did not do a firearm gunshot residue collection. It was not requested at the time, and that is not routinely performed.
So we really don't know that he had the shotgun in his hand and fired it if there was no residue. Test it.
Well, that gets into the validity of gunshot residue, which I believe you should probably speak to a firearms expert on.
Which I am.
Okay.
Okay. All right. All right. So in order to get the toxicology report, to just do another open records? Or is
yes,
it,
you can do another open records request, and then you should be able to get a copy of the toxicology report that way.
It's not nothing, since you know who I am and I've already done an open records for all of the records for the case. Can it just be sent to me?
I don't believe it can, because this was done after you had requested the records at that time.
But I think an open records is standing, isn't it?
Honestly, I'm not aware, because all of these requests get directed to the open records, that I never actually give records to people, so I'm not sure what that procedure is and what I'd be allowed to give you. So you could contact them and see if that's still a standing thing, and they would be able to send it over to you.
Okay, so it was a stimulant. What drug was found in there? What was the stimulant?
He had methamphetamine.
So he had meth.
Yes.
And that stimulant having meth in the system, I'm just trying to make sure I understand, would not have prevented him from defending himself.
It's a stimulant, so it would make he would be active.
He would be active.
Yes.
Okay, so, and I'm just asking questions here. So if someone holds a shotgun to your head, he has a stimulant, and he grabs the barrel, wouldn't that be active?
Remember, in this case, it's an intraoral, so the barrel was inside of the mouth with the mouth closed.
Okay. So he couldn't have been, and I'm just asking, he couldn't have been asleep or anything, and the guy put the gun in his mouth.
Well, and that's why we were checking to see if depressants were present in his system, and they were not.
And there was no depressants. Okay. Okay, I just wanted to make sure I was clear on what your findings were. All right, thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Okay, ma'am.
Already the suspicion of homicide instead of suicide was arising from day one. And it was during this time Detective Ellenberg wrote in his report that he had no reason to not believe it was a suicide, as that's what the roommate told him. And also, DJ had a history of meth use and suicidal thoughts and had vocalized it. So it all makes sense and it all adds up to a suicide, right? No. The detective never cordoned off the scene. He never taped it off and didn't treat it as a crime scene, while allowing the occupants to clean up the very day and stay the night there, the same night that it happened. The love seat where DJ was sitting on that day when it happened was also burned almost immediately, while officials were still on the scene. Kathy, DJ's mother, even walked through the scene and saw what no mother ever should. Her son's blood throughout. The next couple days after the shooting, interviews were being conducted with Brandy and with the roommate. The first interview with DJ's wife, she was kind of all over the place. She said they argued, they didn't argue, other people were there, they weren't there. Brandy stated that the roommate had indeed shot DJ. She never wavered from this story, and that it was not a suicide as he stated when it first happened. She said she was scared to say that it was a homicide right away, and even stayed an additional day at the scene and didn't call police out of what she said was fear for her life. She was being threatened. Her kids were being threatened. Her family was being threatened. These were all statements that she later gave to police. She said that the roommate was approximately 2 to 3 feet away from DJ when the shooting occurred. She did mention that her and the roommate had a sexual relationship in the past, so immediately police should have thought perhaps this was not a suicide, or potentially there's a motive for it to not be a suicide. Now, the roommate's interview was very inconsistent at first. He stated that DJ and Brandy were fighting, at which time DJ asked to borrow his phone so he could call his mother because he wanted to leave the situation, and he didn't have a phone during this time. And during what he said was a fight that he heard, he states that he heard a boom and then ran into the next room and found that DJ was shot. He then changed the story a bit and said he saw DJ holding the gun in his mouth and attempted to wrestle it away, and somehow it just went off. That's a whole different story from running into the next room and finding someone dead from a self-inflicted gunshot. He begins to stumble during the interview a bit, becoming emotional and saying he can't really remember what happened that day, which would make sense, but you would also remember if you did the shooting or not. He did go into detail about the history that the three of them had, DJ, Brandy, and himself, which included drug use, meth specifically, and the sexual relationship he had with DJ's wife, Brandy. They again questioned him a few days later, and he would again change a part of his story to say that he did not know if he actually touched the gun, as he had stated earlier. He was then asked if he would take a polygraph test, and he agreed. He did not pass this polygraph test. He was asked if he pointed the gun at DJ. He said no. He was asked if he shot DJ. He also said no. Both times, the polygraph test indicated that there was deception. He went on to say that he was trying to wrestle the gun away from DJ, only this time Brandy had her arm around him and was trying to pull the gun away from him when the gun went off. Again, 3 vastly different stories. That alone should raise suspicion of it not being a suicide. During the questioning, he did say something that stood out a bit. He said, "I never ever wanted to take a man's life." He was a felon with a gun that he wasn't supposed to have. He wasn't arrested. He sort of tampered with the scene with the love seat burning right away. Not arrested. His home was a known drug den. Not arrested. He failed a polygraph test, not illegal, but suspicious, and he changed his story multiple times, but not arrested. During all of this time, others were also interviewed, old man whose property it was, and someone named Fat Boy. The stories were all over the place, and none of them at first wanted to admit they were even there when it happened. Meanwhile, Amanda and Amanda's mother and family, these are DJ's family members, were not having any luck getting any answers from detective or any other police that were in charge of the investigation. Phone calls were made, never returned, letters written, visits, just to be put off time and time again and not get any answers. It seems like the investigation was very mishandled, to say the least. No forensics were done on the gun, the bloodied gun that was told to be moved and touched and compromised. There was a bottle of bleach that was recently used on the patio, and there was a trash bin with a towel with blood on it that was never tested. The detective did change it from suicide to homicide at first, But the medical examiner and the detective never spoke to one another, so the manner of death was never changed. It was just ruled a suicide, based on the caller saying it was a suicide. That's it. That's what they had to go on. The family then hired a private investigator, Eric Eccles, to look into the case and get the toxicology report. And there's also a very frustrating phone call between the PI and the medical examiner's office. And the medical examiner went on to say that it would not be changed, the manner of death would not be changed because DJ had meth in his system, which is a stimulant and would have energized him to leave a situation if he felt he was being attacked. But what she didn't mention is that he also had marijuana in his system, which is a depressant. She confirmed that there was no gunshot residue test that was ever conducted, even though he supposedly shot himself. That should be step one. The family never got any response, no answers. To this day, Walker County would not budge nor call them back, nor explain why they wouldn't rule the case a homicide. The family feels that DJ's case is not handled serious, and she felt that she was lied to, the family did, because perhaps he was just seen as a drug addict off the street, or just didn't feel the case was important enough to look into, open and shut, a suicide. But DJ Fickey was a human being, father of 3 kids, and a family who loves him to this day, and they just want answers.
I once saw this episode of Forensic Files where this guy did something very alibi-ish. He was in a boat filming himself as he fished, always looking down at his clock, and this video made it impossible for him to be a suspect in a murder. Because at the time this person was murdered, he was fishing. Remember this story. Back to DJ Fickey. Every podcast, every YouTube true crimer, everyone that's ever covered this story, we all sound like broken records. We all say the same thing, and it's probably the same thing you're thinking as you listen to this. The police does not want to try the neighbor because of the mistakes they made. Horrible mistakes. I mean, that's the normal conclusion anyone would come when you do clueless things such as allow the person to touch the gun to give them a reason for touching the gun. When you do clueless things, even down to the autopsy, and your reason for being so stubborn to not list it as a suicide, for you to allow them to burn the couch DJ was sitting in. It's almost as if the roommate was working hand in hand with the police department. And it disgusts me. It disgusts me so much to call this man the roommate when I've covered so many more cases calling the suspect by their real name. But we care so little about DJ Fickey, but we care so much to protect this, you know what? And really, truly disgusts me. But I've come up with a different conclusion than what most people are thinking. I think you're afraid. I'll give you this. Even with all of your mess ups, this is still an easy, winnable case. So I'm perplexed as why the prosecutor will not list this as a homicide and charge the roommate. Look at it this way. If anyone that hears about this story are just regular, average American citizens, and we all come up to the same conclusion, it's we, the people, who should be making the decision. It is the grand jury, which is us, that should be making the decision if this is enough evidence. You have 2 witnesses that were there. You have motive. Clear motive. You have the murder weapon belonging to the roommate. You have DJ's fears. You have DJ's accusations of being assaulted by multiple people. So even in your ransacked Barney Fife Police Department, you're not doing the job that was so easy to do, even in all of your mistakes. You still have enough to take this to trial, and you still have enough to let us, we the people, the grand jury, make the decision on if there's enough evidence or not. And if we live in a country that we have scientists and forensics that are so good at their job, they can take a man trying to establish an alibi on a videotape and use the sun in the background behind him to know what real time it was instead of the time shown on the tape, then I'm sure we have someone that can take many of the plethora of photos that DJ has to look at his arm measurements and get an accurate reading that you guys did not do on the autopsy, that can show that it was physically impossible for this man to kill himself. And for everyone who's listening to this, and you think that this is for enjoyment, for any pleasure, I'll let DJ Fickey's sister have the last words on this one. And we'll see you all next time on the Alibi-ish podcast.
It's hard. It's definitely hard.
Yeah.
I was telling you yesterday, people don't see this side of us, on podcasts and everything. They just hear us tell the story. That's the only part they see, and that's why a lot of people think they treat true crime as entertainment.
Yeah,
like stories you would tell around a campfire or something. They listen to the podcast while they're doing their housework or while they're at work or driving, and when it's over, it's over. They go on with their lives. They never think twice about it. To us, this is our everyday life all day long.